Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I just want to be able to give you a little snippet from the former conservatives and former liberals talk on the middle ground with Jubilee. Now, I really like the Jubilee channel. I think that they do a great job of bringing many voices together. I know that a lot of conservatives kind of like pin them out to be a little bit too liberal. In my opinion, I think that's just like a city vibe. You just kind of get that with city folks and people from LA, East Coast, or even on the West Coast. Like these LA folks who started the Jubilee group, I think they're actually, some of them are Christians, the people who founded it, but also they do have some more liberal members, but it's a hodgepodge of different people who honestly want to be able to seek after truth. And I'm really excited to go into this episode, especially since I consider myself sort of former liberal. And when I came to college, I kind of like had my worldview change upside down in many ways and became more conservative or moderate. So let's just dive in and let's see what we think.
You'll never meet a Republican that uses pronouns. It's just a fact. It's only
Everybody
the left.
uses pronouns. Just some people choose to enhance
Okay, well, my
their
pronouns now for the rest of the time are pretty princess.
That's not a pronoun.
What do you mean?
Those are not even pronouns.
Okay, so what are your
That's
Zze, Zen, Zer?
Okay, so you kind of see what they're going to get into. A lot of backbiting, it sounds like, especially with the pronoun thing, gender. It's a big line of discussion, especially even on my channel. We talk about gender dysphoria and then just the ludicrousy of just like talking about gender and sexuality. And sometimes people do get fixated on the identity stuff so much that it becomes really tribalistic. But hopefully, and we're going to be praying that there be actually some decency and neutrality on certain issues.
Former political views were cult-like. Can the agreeers please step forward?
I was gonna say, I think both are just two separate cults, because which is so funny. And I think also sides have like ironically kind of switched, because as a Republican now, I'm like so anti-war. I'm anti-sending money to all these different countries that are not ours while people are sick from the water and children are starving. Anti-pharmaceutical, anti-big government, anti all these things. And I'm like, that is original liberalism. So I'm like, I think I'm more like independent, but I register and I vote as far right as I possibly can.
Okay, so this blonde girl here, bigger pretty girl, I think she has something really bright to say, which is that the liberals in the past, in the 60s, 70s, were all about free speech and not even like big government. There's definitely a little bit less big government because of the Vietnam War and trying to stifle freedom of speech. So freedom of speech was really a liberal concept or a movement in the 70s, especially with feminism, gay rights, and Black liberation, all of that as well. So nowadays, it just feels like the script has been swapped, and conservatives now hold on to freedom of speech so much so. And so now other people are thinking like, well, this was originally a liberal idea, but now conservatives are really taking the banner for it.
I think both sides are very tribal.
Yeah.
But in terms of cult, at this moment in time, I think the left is more cult-like. I was in it for 20 years. What's
so legit, like this lady is spot on. I was in college. Okay, I think that's one of the major areas, hotbeds for the cult-like activity of liberalism today. And it's more left-wing liberalism. It's not even like the moderate liberalism that you still see in, places where I would say even where I went to school at Michigan State University, you just saw people who were pretty moderate and understanding, but it's really the loud people, the extremists, the leftists that kind of created this cult-like mentality that everybody had to get along with them or else they were a bigot, they were a homophobe, they were racist. All these things had to be tied to an identity. And this type of dogma, this dogmatic mindset, was just captivating so many people, and so many people were scared of actually saying anything because the left-wing liberalism, as we say, not really liberal, very dogmatic leftism, was kind of taking root in academic spaces. So I can definitely see that even just like before she says what she says. Let me just let you hear what she says.
today is the woke left, but we used to call it social justice left, progressive left.
Known by conservatives as woke.
Right, but here are some of the characteristics that I think make it more cult-like than perhaps the conservative side. One is that if you had questions, you had to check your privilege, or there was always some line that they would use to get you to stop asking questions, which is sort of cult-like. And then the other thing was there was this encouragement to separate from people who didn't agree with you. And so I slowly over time like whittled my world down to just people who were in the social justice left. And there was really, for people who left, which I did eventually, which was a long process, it's a bit like you become an apostate. You don't just leave or have different opinions. It's like once you leave, you can't come back.
That is a cult. It's like Scientology.
Well, I have perspective.
So yeah, I think when you define cult-like behavior, now a lot of scholars disagree about what a cult is like. There's brainwashing. Obviously, it's not always just about money and just kind of like exploiting people with their money, but it's usually separating people and then giving them this strict regimen of beliefs and separating them from the people that they are closely associated with. So oftentimes you see like parents not even getting a word in. Now, this is kind of a trend even in the 90s and early 2000s with kids kind of being, these powerhouses for liberal academics and saying like, down with patriarchy, or even with sexuality kind of on the rise as a main cultural talking point. You want to be able to have even killed discussions with your kids, but nowadays it just feels like with the leftist propaganda, the indoctrination I saw even at college, you couldn't even get a word in with family members, perhaps some of you may relate, where it just felt like they were so engrossed in this ideology that anybody who sidestepped or like didn't toe the line with the ideology, they were considered just backwards or not thinking, dull Neanderthals.
Well, I have perspective because I came from a really religious background, and there's a lot of shame around believing something other than what you're taught. Because of that, it makes you feel like you can't express any questions without being told that you're going to hell, you're going to be exiled from your family. And so when I started thinking a little bit outside of the lines of what I was always told, family members literally to this day will not speak to me, will not look at me in family gatherings where you're just supposed to be like, you're my family, aren't you supposed to love me endlessly? And in turn, they've exiled me because I don't believe the things that they believe.
And I think that's
Okay, that's pretty heartbreaking. I actually believe that. I don't know if this girl is from the South. There's many Bible belts, even from Michigan, like west side of Michigan. It's like the Bible Belt. I don't condone fundamentalist Christianity. And now we all have fundamental beliefs about life, like kindness, being kind to people, not murdering people. Hopefully we are fundamental about that. But there's a section of Christianity and even just religious people, say fundamentalist Muslims or Orthodox Jews. Sometimes they can become so fundamentalist that they exclude people, even their own family members, right? Whether it's violence or just kind of cutting them off from the family. And it's sad to hear that this woman actually had that experience. I can see that as a Christian myself. Like I've seen it happen where people just had not a great family environment where it was just like no open discussion of any issue. You had to like believe in these because that's what tradition taught us. But sometimes as a Christian, I believe like you should look at the evidence, you should look at scripture, you should look at science, you should look at everything around you because everything points back to God. Now, for her, I think sometimes Christian religious folk can get so knee deep in just even indoctrination, right? Like leftist liberals indoctrinating their kids, believing in something so that they can feel safe. But really, the truth is so much more complicated, and we're always learning and growing. So with religious extremists on the left or the right, conservative Christians can also be at fault here. Makes sense to me.
horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
By the way,
Agreed,
I
yeah.
am ironically pretty far known as far right in my community, and then ironically very leftist at times because you can't please everyone. But I have never cut off a person because of their political beliefs in my life, but everyone on the left did it to me.
I will say from my own experience, but coming from the opposite. So especially when the George Floyd incidents were happening, it was kind of, a consensus that you should be BLM, rah, 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 all cops are bad. And just me questioning that within my own circles, it's like there's a lot of pushback and it feels a little awkward because I'm just, it's literally just asking questions. If I did have to, point a finger, I would point it at the left or the liberals for feeling attacked by words that are said on the other side. Because there's not a lot of, conservatives that are like, oh, you said there's more genders, I'm offended. I'm personally attacked by that.
That's literally only one side.
Yeah, it is.
Can the disagreeers please step forward?
I honestly think that both sides have very tribalistic tendencies at a time. As far as the question, were my beliefs personally cult-like? I don't think that I was in a cult. And I mean, even I think you mentioned that conservatives don't get offended by speech as much, but conservatives get offended by pronouns. They got offended by Mr. Potato Head. They get offended by all kinds.
Really stupid things.
Yeah, they get very triggered also. And for me, when I left the right, that was something I noticed because I started off as anti-SJW, triggered feminist stuff, and I'm like, the right is kind of becoming this way too a little bit with some things, very offended and triggered.
I would like to push back a little bit about conservatives being offended by pronouns. I think it's more so that they are being forced and to acquiesce to the pronouns of other people, which is, a form of, controlling speech.
Well, don't conservatives get really mad when the whole pronouns and bio thing?
No,
oh, look, you have pronouns.
I get what both of you are saying, because my thing is why would I ever care if you have pronouns in bio, but I will never call you by
I think
them.
it's more that people just view it as a tribal signifier. So in the same way that someone might view, oh, that person has a cross in their profile.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely, if I see pronouns in someone's bio, I'll roll my eyes. It doesn't mean that I hate the person or not, but it is going to signify to me, in 95% of cases, I'm gonna know exactly what
I know exactly who you are almost.
Yeah, so humans, obviously, we are tribal. We also stereotype. Now, I've had so many friends, some even conservative, more or less, who use pronouns, and I don't knock them off because they choose to use pronouns, right? I think one way it could be respectful to people who they want to associate with, whether they're in the social work field, in psychology, which are more liberal fields, or education. Now, I don't believe I would do that. I don't personally want to use pronouns because I think it comes too close, at least for me and my conscience, to supporting and affirming these neo-pronouns, these ideas about switching your gender, which I think are really harmful, whether it's a fringe amount of people who are actually transitioning, or it's just people believing that they can transition or change their genders. I hope that we regress actually back to a second wave feminist idea about biology being biology, and that we can attain some level of equality between men and women without having to change our anatomy to do so. So I think that's where a lot of people are kind of sick of seeing the pronouns just words are powerful, but you're really stepping on my shoes or my toes, and I'm not about it. And so I definitely agree with Carrie and all these other people saying the same thing.
In their bio.
Because I'm not going to participate in your delusion. And my thing is you'll never meet a Republican that uses pronouns. It's just a fact. It's only
everybody
the left.
uses pronouns. Just some people choose to announce
Okay, well, my
their
pronouns now for the rest of the time are pretty princess.
That's not a pronoun.
What do you mean?
Those are not even pronouns.
Okay, so what are your ze, they, them, zer, he, she?
Yeah, I think that
Pause. Sorry.
Yeah, to the delusional piece, I've heard this argument a lot, and I think, you know what? I think it's kind of true. If you believe that you're a man and you've been born a woman, XX chromosomes, woman, XY, man, just looking at the gonads, right? You can distinguish who is male and female. And using, again, the intersex argument, I just don't think it's really powerful enough. And for people, we want to respect our neighbor, our friend, our coworker who may have differing values or beliefs. I think that's totally cool to, exercise your own judgment and just say hey, do I care so much about the relationship that I'm willing to sacrifice my own comfort for this ideology, or is the ideology so much more important? For me, ideology is so much more important in this case because I personally have seen the detrimental effects of transitioning, of gender dysphoria, and what we call affirmative care. Check out my podcast. We talk about it all the time. I've talked to trans people and researchers about this issue.
Circling back to the cult idea, we kind of straight in went to pronouns, which I think is, again, it's a kind of a hot topic. The media really makes you believe that one side is more of a cult than the other. That's all subjective. Some of the people that are on my side, it's cultish, but it doesn't mean everyone is.
Well, let me give you an example, like, because I agree with you that the media is fomenting these like right side, left side cults. 100%, I agree with you.
Yeah.
So like when I quote unquote like left the left, it was because I had begun to question the policies that were surrounding the whole COVID situation. And I experienced cultishness on the left and the right for sure. But what I found was if there were people who were willing to listen to me, they were like 95% of the time they were on the right about like, I think the government is trying to control us. I think that they're trying to force us to do XYZ things. I only found ears on the right, except in maybe 1 or 2 cases. So like for me, I was like when the prompt is like, oh, the left is, or your former side is a cult. Like that was very visceral to me. There was a section of the right that I could talk to, and they didn't feel like there was a section of the left.
Well, you can always talk to me about it sometime if you want.
I was gonna say,
I'm
me
more
too.
than happy to talk to you about the COVID stuff.
Thank you, my friend.
I think Trump will win the next election.
Hey.
Love Trump. I think he's the greatest president we've ever had, and I love him. I've loved him for a long time. Personality, everything. I will say, the more they do this witch hunt after him, he just keeps getting more and more popular. And now that we have free speech on Twitter, you cannot deny that people love him. Like the Black community is coming forward, and it's just funny because I love watching them go after him because I think elections at this point are 100% fake and rigged. I just watch him rise in popularity. Huh?
Are you gonna think that if he wins?
I mean, with the entire world against you, I'd be shocked. But I just think now it's harder for them to hide it.
Yeah, I mean, I had major TDS for his Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah. A lot of people on the right have it. They were like obsessed with him and crazy.
The cult thing.
Yeah, it's a cool thing.
I had major Trump derangement syndrome through pretty much his entire first presidency, except I was a little softer towards the middle of 2020. But even so, I didn't really come around to liking Trump until after he was president. I went totally like Republican in my viewpoints, but I think that like I came around to liking him unfortunately after his presidency because I saw what we got next. And so now at this point I'm voting for Trump in the primary, in the general, God willing.
My life.
This was really interesting. Okay, so a little tea about my background. I did not vote for Trump first time around, right, in 2016. And I'm so thankful that I did not, because I think people would have chewed me out in my social circles in college. Like so many of them, I was part of the most progressive groups on college campuses. I was called an intercultural aide. If anybody knows that, in my life from Michigan State University and other campuses, you'll have something that is like the minority watchdog, or like just someone who's there to help minorities and like Pell Grant eligible folks. And it's really a great group. I honestly believe that. But then 2016 happened, and there's so much media hate and spewing about Trump and all that. And I honestly was not very political at that point. I think college just opens you up and opens this door to political conversations about history, about social policies, about marginalized folks and identities, that you start to really think where you fit on the map socially and politically. So for me, I did not vote for Trump in 2016. I won't say that I did or did not vote for Trump in 2020, but I definitely did not vote Democrat. And I'll just say this much. I don't think Trump is my ideal candidate for any of these elections. I just don't really feel like he's a great political leader. But after I've heard from so many other people about like, what are your options? Hillary? I definitely would have picked Hillary. And yeah, just not Hillary. And Biden, oh, come on. Guys, like I pray for the man. Like I pray for the man that he just has his head on straight. Like he can't talk in front of the camera. It's sad. It's very, very sad. And I wish the best for our country and for our leaders, including President Biden. But we know that there's a lot of difficulties with having a president that is going senile And I think everybody on the left knows it too, and that's why they're kind of pushing for a newer blood in the Democratic Party. And we'll see. But I think that they do have an argument right off the bat about Trump, because he has given people a lot of freedom to just talk about things boldly. And he gave courage to the American people and patriotism back to the American people. And that's what we need to unify this country. Now, I personally would love to see Vivek for 2024. And, I think policy-wise, he has great ideas. He's very even keel and talks to just about everyone. Very articulate. Love that guy. But that's another conversation.
My life was way better then.
My life was way better.
Afford things.
I'm concerned that he's going to win as well, and I don't think it's because he's the greatest president we've ever had. I think it's because the Democrats have a branding problem. And I think Trump is a brilliant marketer, and I think he's a brilliant con man, and I think he's done a fabulous job making the case to the people who love him that he's going to do what they want him to do, even though he doesn't. So I think he definitely can win. I think they're both wildly unpopular, both him and Biden.
Totally.
I think that there's not a lot of great options. I think the vast majority of people voting want another option, and I do think that his base has more enthusiasm than the Democratic base does.
I think it's funny you say that, because I think that about the right. I think we have the worst branding issue in the world. I think the right is so tacky.
The Republican Party does. Trump does.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the Republican Party
marketer.
is just so tacky, 20 years behind. But it's funny because I'm watching far left people come onto my side now, and I'm it's starting to shake things up. But it's funny because I think if there was another option between him and the current vegetable we have, and also Kamal is so unpopular, you just have double trouble with them.
The Democrats aren't, they're not putting up a viable option. I think
RFK I thought was
I think the
amazing.
worst thing that the Democrats did for themselves was push RFK out of that primary process.
I couldn't agree more. RFK, he really gave some great points, whether it's about big pharma, about media corruption with COVID. I could go on and on. You should definitely listen to one of his talks, even with Jordan Peterson, if anybody likes his conversation with him, or any other podcast like Joe Rogan. RFK, I thought he was really, really outstanding in how he presented just the policies and stances that he had as a Democrat.
I'd like to start off. I really do hope Trump wins. I think it's for the best interest of America that he does. Unfortunately, I do fully believe that the Democratic Party is a bunch of political terrorists, and I do believe that they will do whatever they can to steal the election. It's a hot take, but from the last election with the ballots, I really don't think they're gonna make it easy.
Trump called and said to find fake ballots?
I mean, there's a longer call that you could listen to that debunks everything. I mean, he's not gonna end up in jail. All of that is just, a hit job, but I do think the Democratic Party would rather die than have him in power, and I think they could do that because people aren't aware about the ballot fraud that's going on.
Just quick on that, on the voter fraud comments that you made. What about yesterday? Sidney Powell just pled guilty to 6 counts of the conspiracy in Georgia against the election there. So that's actual fraud that was committed on the right side for Trump.
There's probably on both sides then, but I would say it's much more in the favor of seeing that, during the election count, they pause it and they, mail in ballots for Joe Biden.
I also think we shouldn't take guilty pleas at face value because the justice system really, really
that would be believing the rest of the system, which
guilty.
I don't believe that of it. So I guarantee there's fraud on both sides, and it's all
for sure.
and I think it's all corrupt. So.
I agree.
I don't think he's going to win. I agree with you. I don't trust the last election results, but I actually don't trust any presidential election results since Kennedy. So I don't. I just think. I think. I am going to vote because screw them. I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna allow them to instill apathy in me. But I don't really put a lot of stock in national elections anymore, and I think local is more important. So I think that they probably are gonna not give it to a Republican this time around.
Democrats are more compassionate than Republicans.
I agree. Fancy meeting you here.
I was waiting for someone to say something, and I hate it. I don't want to be sitting here. I will say, I do think the left tends to be more emotional. I would assume that would come with feelings of empathy. And I will say, people on the right, I am not actually very popular on the right. As soon as you disagree on certain things, I mean, the death threats, the
You're
hate.
woke.
Yeah. Oh, so you're liberal now, and I'm like,
That's what
and
I
there are
got.
certain things like abortion's a hot topic. I think it's a little crazy and it's a little too far. I would hope that in the future I become a more middle voice in the Republican Party. But I do find in general, like people on the left, I think because you're more emotional, inherently you're gonna care more about people's feelings. I'm not really one to care that much. That's why I'm on the other side. You know what I mean? But I'll give you guys that credit.
I actually agree with what you're saying a lot because they've even done like literal brain scans and they can actually predict people's political beliefs based on their brains up to like 80 to 90% accuracy. Like it's insane. And so I think, well, you're right, that people on the left do tend to think more so, I think it's with their left side of the brain, that has more emotion involvement, which can be both a blessing and a curse, I think, at times, because politics are also about factual information. And so feelings are obviously not all that matter. But yeah, Democrats do tend to be more compassionate at the end of the day.
Yeah, and when I was on the left my whole life, and like I was literally an emo kid. So it's like funny being on this side now. Now I kind of like I'm a lot more analytical about things. I try to cut the emotion as honestly a survival tactic at this point.
I agree with that too, because for me in my personal journey, it was very close to that. Like my mom used to tell me that. She's like, you have like zero empathy. But I feel like as I went through my journey, not just like transitioning in politics, but just like I went through my own kind of self-discovery journey. And I feel like empathy really came into play there. And as I started to listen to stories from people that had lived experiences, I was like, wow, I really do feel for them and I can put myself in their shoes. And I feel like now I'm even maybe an empath. Like I'm very much.
You can totally gain it and you can totally lose it.
Yeah.
Totally. It's up to you.
Yeah. But I do feel like since that, I feel like, I am so much more compassionate now towards, humanity in general and people. And as I gained empathy, I became more liberal.
I think Democrats are much more concerned with like social programs that help people who aren't themselves. And I think that they often are the leaders of the civil rights movements of our time. And I think those things and leading policy with people first, I think is a bigger priority for them.
So I'll say this much. There's a lot of meatiness to this whole prompt. Democrats are more compassionate than Republicans. I think you have to define what compassion is. And I think the blonde chick over here, sorry, I forget her name, but she's got some decent thoughts. Honestly, like not a blonde in that respect. I think I really do resonate with her statement about how people who are more empathic, like me, I started out pretty liberal, like since high school. I grew up in a rural conservative town, so I just always felt like, like conservatives, boring, rigid, all those stereotypes. And I wasn't really a Christian until I became a Christian in college. And then in college, just get opened up to the cesspool of leftism that continues to just erode at your core moral values. And so you just thought like, wait, isn't there common sense about how to approach people? I think you could be compassionate and very even keel and thoughtful, calculated about how to solve problems. And the problem is a lot of policies like welfare, in my opinion, my family's Chinese, so we come from a communist background. And what happens is when we give more power to the government, they will continue to take. Like if we trust the government to do all the problem solving, then they will take. But especially my dad, who's a small business owner, and plenty of people who are very, very invested in their local communities. I truly believe it's the local people, the state level people. That's where the power comes from and should remain, because those local issues should be tackled by local municipalities, by the mayor, by officials, city council, and other powers, school boards. And what we see happen is honestly like a lack of patriotism, a lack of civil engagement, and laziness, in my opinion, where people, as compassionate as you can be, you can appear that way through social media, you can appear like that in your journal articles and media appearances. It may feel good to have these big, broad statements, BLM, and like whatever the liberal stances are, but it may not actually help the people that they're trying to serve. And I find that a lot of the times with more of the liberal progressive movement in the last few years, last 5 years at least, is that they say things like defund the police. That doesn't actually help Black people. It really, really does not help Black people. Plenty of Black people want police in their neighborhoods to patrol gangsters and crime and drug use. All that cannot be helped by a single slogan. And a lot of the times you can spew slogans that are very compassionate, feels good, looks good, but down to the barrel, I think you just don't see a lot of results. And that's where the cold heartedness of the Republican, the very cerebral Republican analytic mind comes in. I think just you need both. You need to be able to see the issue and have compassion, but then use that conservative analytical brain to come through and say, like, hey, we want to care for these people, and this is the step to get there, instead of just the immediate gratification of we're going to sing Kumbaya and we're going to make posters and we're going to scream in people's faces and we're going to pray for justice and all these things. Pray all you want. I believe in prayer, but there needs to be actions that are commensurate with the local needs that isn't going to cause more damage to local communities like the BLM riots, right? So just some food for thought. Think about it.
For them. And it's not to say that Republicans don't have empathy or compassion. I just don't think it necessarily leads their politics.
So Jonathan Haidt has a great book called The Righteous Mind, which I think everyone on this panel would love it probably. But in that book, he's trying to figure out, I think the subtitle is Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. And he divides morality up into different types of morality. One of those types, the one that liberals and conservatives have in common, is the care-harm principle. They both care about people. They both don't want people to be harmed. But the difference is that they have different definitions of what's going to harm people and what's caring for people. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really interesting. When I started leaving the left, I thought, oh, Republicans don't care about people, that's why they oppose raising the minimum wage. And it wasn't until I started listening to other points of view that I realized, oh, they oppose raising the minimum wage because they think it's going to harm people, because you're going to get fewer hours, fewer workers, people are going to get fired. And so it's not that we disagree, liberals and conservatives, on the why. Like, we agree on that, why we should care for people. We disagree on the how.
I agree with that 100%. But adding more to that is my way of showing compassion would be to tell someone that pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Like, you have more potential, you can do this, as opposed to someone saying that, okay, the government should step in and support you and do X, Y, Z for you, which in the grand scheme of things isn't going to benefit that person. It's going to teach them that they can rely on a bigger being to be, their support system. But if you learn how to pull yourself up, I think you can be more equipped to go throughout this world in a successful way.
Yeah, I say amen to that. I think that's a really solid point, because what happened in college is that a lot of people are taught about oppression and how systems are there and they don't change, or they haven't changed, and we need to change them. Now, there's good in that. I think that there are a lot of systems that I personally believe are corrupt. Medical systems, educational systems, political systems. It sounds like everybody agrees about that. But the problem is when you only have bad news and there's no hope in the mix, that there's no individual hope, like, I can do something. I don't have to just demand the government to do it for me. I don't have to demand some political leader to do it for me, but I can do something. I can step up to the plate, and I can ask other people to come alongside of me and do something great with the knowledge that I have and the beliefs that I have. And that's a big part of that growth mindset. And people have a lot of limiting self-beliefs, especially when they go through college and hear all the bad historical plot lines about people being marginalized, people being disenfranchised. No wonder you're going to be depressed and anxious. And no wonder you're going to continue to feed into that algorithm of, patriarchy and, just like cis privilege and homophobia and racism and all these ideas of like how everybody's like out to get you. But the fact of the matter is, most people don't care. That's the truth. Most people don't care about you. And let me tell you, that's kind of good news. It's kind of good news. You know why? Because it frees you up to a lower expectation of other people's opinions, okay? Lower value of other people's opinions. And that actually frees you up. And I've learned in my own personal life that if you want to find your voice, you got to speak to people. You have to talk to people, and places like middle ground in your personal life, family, in other political maybe arenas even. You want to talk to people so that you can gain a better grip of what you actually believe in and ultimately live that out. It's not just all philosophical, it's not just all abstract, it's really practical. And the more that you do it, the more powerful you get. So exercise your voice, learn how to communicate, live it out consistently. Actions speak louder than words. So you can do it. You have free will, you've got power in you.
Can't both things be true? I don't feel like liberals are telling people that they need someone to pick them up and that they can't do it for themselves. I think they're saying that there's inequalities in the world and that there's structures in place that put people in a position to where they can't get the life or the things that they want, the things that they deserve, and they can do both at the same time. You can pick yourself up and you can accept welfare.
But
and I think that there's a
implying-
lot of programs that people have benefited from, even just the ability to feed their kids. It doesn't mean that this mom is all of a sudden going to not work because she's getting welfare. She's probably already has 2 or 3 jobs.
Talking from my own experience, I think if I'm being told, as I was, that I am oppressed and that there are systems against me, I am not going to have the same capabilities of lifting myself up from that if I'm maintaining the mindset that I am oppressed and that I can't do something. Instead of saying that I could have done better, I'll be like, oh, the system's against me. I am
I feel
black.
like black people are told not that, they're told they have to work twice as hard, so they do. I don't think that black people don't try because they're told that they're oppressed. I think that they are told that you're gonna have to do more because of discrimination.
Yeah, I think in terms of like,
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I think I agree with Javen a lot more on this one. And the Black conservatives, I think, typically have higher wealth. Now, Republicans just deal better with money in general, I believe. Do they fund the most nonprofits? Maybe they're religious conservatives where they fund nonprofits in that way. But there are a lot of social programs out there, government-based, religious-based, just nonprofits in general that help people in this country. I think that is a really missed point in American politics. It's just like nonprofits should help people, but ultimately we don't give enough voice to them. It's like government should help people. I don't agree with that. I think nonprofits, especially churches and religious organizations, what they're called to do, honor God, help serve their neighbor, shelter the homeless, clothe the poor, feed the hungry, help with humanitarian crises. I think those things, I see a lot of conservatives actually help in and donate and give all the time. But it's true that liberals, I think, the microphone is always kind of on blast for all the emotional compassion, I am compassionate, I'm compassionate, I'm compassionate piece, where conservatives just don't like market it. I think they just like, they tithe, they donate, there's plenty of a lot of like Samaritan's Purse and, other projects that are great big relief programs. And Salvation Army, you got a lot of number of nonprofits there that help people. But back to Javen's point, there is a lot of limiting self-beliefs when you're told that because of your racial category that you won't succeed or you have to work twice as hard. I think you should work 3 times as hard, 4 times as hard, 5 times as hard as you can for whatever ambition, whatever goal you have. It's not based on whatever your family's history is that you should look up to, because it could be very, very low. My family, my dad was, again, coming from a communist country, came in with 20 grand in debt back in the 80s or 90s, and he worked his butt off, right, to be able to get to the place that he is today, to own a restaurant, to provide for a family of 5 children. And now he's doing really great because he worked day and night. And, I don't have too much against hustle culture. I do think that, American capitalism, that's a whole nother conversation, but there is a lot of benefit to the freedoms that we have. And a lot of people just don't know, they're not educated, they don't have that belief in their mind that they can achieve whatever they set their mind to. And the more that we stifle people into believing that their racial category is going to keep them away from their dreams, oh gosh, like they need hope, they need Jesus, they need to know that they're not alone. Like there are people who can show them the way, show them example. And I think that's a big part of our education and our faith, moral background as Americans that needs to be revitalized. So definitely agree a little bit more with Javen on this part. In terms of
compassion. I think that like on the right, there's more like a tough love kind of thing where it's like you have to do this for yourself. We can't do this for you, but we want to encourage you to like take initiative and you can be whatever you want to be. And I think, on the left, it's like, well, we need to help everybody to, realize their full potential. I think both of those things can be compassionate in just in different ways. And I think to a certain degree you need both
Yeah,
mentalities.
exactly.
Like I think we need to find middle ground and say that.
Okay, on to that point, we talk about economics a lot because money is a big part of life, and you can support a lot of people through money. So I always think about this proverb: you give a man a fish and you feed him for one day. And then if you teach a man how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. And so it's that same concept of education, of being able to give people that resource so that they can do it for themselves. The problem is on the left, the extreme is, oh, government take care of you, or others should take care of you. It's other people's problem. That's really not helpful. It's not healthy for your mindset. It's a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress and pressure to wait on other people to get you what you actually want in life. And then you have the extreme right where it's like, pull yourself up from a bootstrap. I would lean more there because I think that you can do so much as an individual. You have a lot more power than you think. But I know that there is no self-made person. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger said when he was receiving an award back in a few decades ago, he was talking about how he's not a self-made man. He made so much money. He, filled the billboards. He, lined up the movies and all of it, got all the babes because why? He worked hard for sure, but because his mom was behind him, because he had a community of people behind him, supporting him as he went to community college, as he got into lifting weights and then getting to movies. And we can never be separated from community because we know like parents, family, church, our community, schools, teachers, coaches, they all come alongside of us and help us get to where we are today. And if it weren't for their compassion, if it weren't for them educating us how to take care of ourselves and parent ourselves as an adult, well then obviously we can't have the same type of outcome or results that we see. And I think there's that middle ground of, okay, let's not just like make people think that they have to rely on other people all the time, but there's also like too much of a bootstrap mentality. And you should also understand that you can ask for help sometimes. People really do find themselves in a pickle. And I think in the middle, you just have examples, having leaders, having role models, having people there who can show you out of systems of oppression, cycles of oppression, whether it be poverty, addiction, a lack of male identity, masculinity, or just not having a positive role model. All those things come alongside of one another, and having a good teacher to show you that it's possible. You can pull yourself up from your bootstrap, but you still need other people's help. I think at the end of the day, that's a pretty human concept, isn't it?
And say that on both sides are finding compassion, I guess, in their. That's why I did step forward. Yeah.
Yeah.
Changing sides was traumatic.
It was very, very, very traumatic. I was grown on the belief, that, Black people are systematically oppressed. And that does a lot for a young person's perspective. And when I started, listening to the other side and I started to dismantle that within myself, I felt like my whole life was really a lie. Not only that, but I was also a pretty big ally of the LGBTQ community. And then seeing transgenderism dismantled in front of me was also very discomforting because I have transgender family members and I was very pro LGBTQ, and it's just feeling that like everything's just crumbling down. It took me a lot of time to cover through it. So it was, I remember the feelings very vividly.
I mean, I have a different perspective because, again, we kind of were on different sides of that spectrum. I was raised militantly in religious and political ideologies my entire life. And when I was 20, my sister was killed in a car accident. And because of that, and that extreme trauma that happened that had nothing to do with my ideologies, it allowed me to open up my eyes to the struggles that other people were going through because I had never experienced something of that devastation before. So I opened my eyes to like what else is going on that I'm not aware of, that I've been in this bubble being told that, no one else is oppressed. I was just told that they weren't real and that I had to be steadfast with my beliefs. And if I questioned them, then, there was this fear and guilt associated with it. And it caused immense amount of trauma that I'm still desperately working through to this day.
I'm sorry for your loss. It's horrible.
Yeah.
It's funny because we're on different sides, supposedly, but we have a lot of similar experiences because the social justice or woke world, I was in it for about 2 decades. I worked with comedians who also were woke and pushed woke beliefs in their comedy, and I really was a true believer in it. I thought it was about ending racism and sexism, and when I started to question it, it was like your whole world crumbling. I lost a lot of friends. They weren't friends, they were allies. That's the way I think of it now. I ended my career and changed my whole perspective. And I think the reason it's so traumatizing, to use that word, is because it's not just like you're changing one opinion on one issue. If you think of your belief system as like a house, you are literally bulldozing your whole house to the ground and starting over with brick by brick. What do I believe about this thing? I don't have an opinion yet on that because I'm trying to read about, I had limited myself in so many ways of what I was allowed to listen to or allowed to read, or, within that cult, there are people that you just don't listen to. I had never listened to a lot of conservatives. So.
Yes, so on that point, I definitely can resonate with some of the folks here, like this former conservative on the left-hand side in the ombre, the gray, and then also the ochre coat. So I sense that, because she was growing up in a conservative household. I did not grow up religious. I mean, my parents, they were Christian, but it was all kind of cultural, never taught us anything. And so when I was going through school, I was a very emotional kid. And so going back to the empath, the compassion prompt, I think I lean more liberal because of that, because I care about especially the underdog. And with Republicans, it just seemed like, you're so callous, and all the brutish, coaches in the school, like they were Republican, or so I assumed. So I never could look up to them. And speaking of that trauma, it's it was pretty traumatic because it was so funny because I was made fun of because I was too effeminate. They called me gay and stuff in school. And regardless of what I was, I didn't really understand, And I think for me, just becoming a Christian and adopting a conservative mindset about even marriage and sexuality later on, I was very pro-marriage, gay marriage, excuse me. Growing up, I was okay, well, I think that's the most compassionate thing. I see Ellen DeGeneres, I see people killing themselves because they were made fun of or for whatever reasons in college, when I was back in high school. And so hearing about these stories just gave me so much more compassion about the people who just want to love the people that they love. And so Jabin, it was just really, really hard to latch onto these new values because it was very much religious. So religion is also a cult, just calling it what it is. Religion is cult. I believe religion can be a good cult. I think there are bad cults, there are good cults. Cults just, there's a negative connotation because cults are bad, but the difference is religion is mostly good. It depends on how you use it, right? Any set of beliefs about God, about people, about nature, about solutions to human ills, it's religious. And for me, I believe in Christ. I believe in Jesus Christ. And he came, died for our sins, and resurrected. And that's the hope of the gospel of Jesus. And so for me, I didn't know about Christianity. I didn't know about the gospel. I didn't know about the Bible. I believed in science. I believed my own thoughts, my own attitudes about life. And ultimately, because people started coming into my life and that they were Christian, they were kind, they were compassionate, but they also had critical thought about life. Atheists who turned to become Christians, and people who were really addicted to drugs and became Christians through supernatural experiences. All those things kind of built in me this idea that, okay, maybe there's another worldview, such as conservative Christianity, that I can also identify with. So college was really a place for me to become conservative, where a lot of people, they probably became more liberal, funny enough.
And that's a problem in and of itself too, is I think to have a good understanding of just society of people of both sides, you have to be able to listen. I think not being able to inquire about why someone believes something that they say and then have a conversation about it is why there's so much division.
I think something I've learned through this whole ordeal is that anyone, anywhere, on any side that tells me not to ask questions, I'm going to immediately ask questions.
Oh my gosh, I love this man so much. Like, seriously, I've seen so many conservative folks, especially I live here in the deep South now, and I just see so many conservative Christians just like are so scared. Like they'll smile with their mouths, but their eyes are filled with fear because they know that you're different, or they know you're a stranger, and they know you're from the city and you dress differently. Better in my opinion. But I digress. I think that there are a lot of people on the right part and the Republican Party even that can be very dogmatic. And I think they should be, especially if they have Christian values. But if they're not asking genuine questions, they're so unsafe in themselves. I don't like unsafe people. I mean, I can like them, but like, I don't gravitate towards unsafe people in the way that they're not holding knives at me. They're not gonna like, hurt me or anything. They're just not really open. And with open people, you can have a relationship. You can have a genuine relationship where you get to question things. And like this guy, I think he's really got a great point that, it's a litmus test for everybody who's listening. Can you ask your family? Can you ask your community, your political party, whoever you're associated with, teacher, coach, these questions that are taboo? If you can, that's a good sign that they're trustworthy, because they're allowing you to question things. If they're not allowing you to question things and giving you some reasoned thoughts and answers, then you should really think about like looking at other options and positions. People can disagree, like even within Christianity or political party. Like get a wide range of thoughts. That's always helpful.
Ask questions.
Of course.
You know what I mean? And
you should be able to.
Yeah.
You should be able to ask questions on either side and just not feel like there's going to be daggers thrown at you for it.
Mm-hmm.
I might not necessarily agree, but I'm allowed to hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
I don't want to shut anyone down. Like freedom of speech. You're allowed to speak. I'm allowed to disagree.
I was on the fence with this one because my experience wasn't necessarily traumatizing, but it was definitely really uncomfortable. My entire family are all like staunch Republicans, Trump supporters, and I'm one of the only ones that have actually branched off of that and away from that. And so I was silenced pretty much because I was getting a lot of pushback and I was getting a lot of hate and kind of being bullied for my views and for speaking out against them and what they believe.
I feel like that's the one thing we have in common. I don't think all of us had a beautiful transitioning. Like I would like to put it in a positive way. It was the worst time of my life. I lost literally everything, which is weird because I always feel like I've been the same Emily. And as soon as you put politics in it, you're like this different person. I'm like, you guys, it's me. I've always been this person. But I will say, like on a positive note, like I lost everything. And I'm so happy I did. I would not have my boyfriend, my friends, my career, my spirituality. I mean, it was the hardest and best thing that's ever happened to me. And if people go through that, I think you can either be a victim or it could be the most hardest, most beautiful thing you ever go through. And I could not be more thankful. I feel very, very lucky.
I think for me, it was less traumatizing and more empowering. I think knowledge is power. And I think when I started, I grew up, same as you guys, very, very religious and conservative, tightly knit family and community. And there was just a very limited allowance of what you could believe. And there was a very limited view of what America was, what America represented internationally. And as a queer person, it was also, conservatives were not super welcoming. And so for me, leaving that space and realizing, oh, the United States is not the beacon of hope that we wish it were internationally, and queer people are allowed to be happy and fulfilled. It just, to me, it felt like freedom, and it felt like, oh, I now see how America became the world's strongest superpower. And there's a lot of issues that come along with that power. And with the freedom we have, it comes at the cost for a lot of other people around the world. And I think getting that information and knowledge, it made me feel like my eyes were opening to the real world and not just what was happening in my community and in this country.
The dual party system hurts America.
1,000%.
Everybody.
There's 350 million people in this country. There's no way we all have two opinions.
Exactly.
No.
And it's crazy too, because we were just talking at the beginning about cults, and it's like, how do we expect people to not become inevitably really divided and polarized if it's like, are you on the right side or the wrong side? And that's it, you know what I mean? So like, depending on who you ask, they're gonna tell you what they think is the right or the wrong side. But
When you were saying Robert Kennedy, you were saying, oh yeah, he would be a great candidate, and I think he would be able to maybe see both sides. Now he's running for an independent. How often does an independent or a non-Republican or Democrat win an election?
Yeah.
Maybe,
Like
maybe
Andrew
local,
Yang.
but not presidential election. So now we've maybe potentially lost a candidate that could see both sides and could actually make change. But when there's so much division on two sides, there's no way that the majority of people in the United States are actually going to get a change in the ways that they need it.
Okay, yeah, I totally agree with what everybody's saying. I mean, everybody's agreeing about this. I think most people in America would agree that the dual party system is super polarizing. So there's not really a debate, even in this context. And who was the last person that won independent? Probably Abraham Lincoln. I'm not really sure, but so far I feel like RFK is not going to win. But I really hope that somebody who is kind of more moderate, liberal, or conservative will kind of step up to play, because regardless of my values and who I'm going to vote, like, I really hope that there's going to be a little bit more conversation about how to bring the country together. And right now, I'm leaning more Republican in terms of my candidates, but if there's somebody who's actually a good Democrat or an independent like RFK who do that, I consider them.
In the ways that they need it.
I think most people are more in the middle and like have a lot more that they agree on than they realize. But this two-party system, and especially the media, they keep us divided. They pit us against each other.
It's funny because I'm like, I actually should be there because I actually don't agree. I think the two-party system is working perfectly because we're all at each other's throats.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they want.
It's working for what they want.
It's working for what they want and not for what we want.
The
So it's
establishment.
actually perfect.
who's they?
The establishment.
That's what I was gonna say.
The political leaders.
Yeah,
It's like
the-
you have
the
a 50, you have a
entrenched
toss up,
political
50%
class.
chance of winning every election because the country's split right in half.
Exactly.
Right.
And everyone has to be tribal, and we have to argue about things like whether or not trans people are trans or real people. And then it stops us from moving any sort of other conversation forward.
Stops moving forward.
We
Right,
get
like the
caught in this
RNC
culture
and the
wars.
DNC have no incentive to have like more parties.
Which is
right?
why I don't think
Like,
Congress puts forth any bills to change the way that elections are
Yeah.
done, without even getting people on the ballot from other parties.
Yeah.
is
Well, we're like
impossible.
distracted fighting, so we don't know they're like poisoning our food and water, and we're all like literally dying.
Exactly.
And to Blake's point, like, I think a good illustration of this happened in the past couple years where the COVID policies first came down, the mandates and stuff. They completely exploited this right-left thing, and they said, oh, wait, no, all the right people are over here and all the left people are over here. And, the 70-something% possibly of people who just kind of follow went with their tribe. They successfully got us at each other's throats about policy like mask and vax, and did you get it? Are you going to get it? Do you agree with the policy? And you know what happened? We forgot about, like, where did this virus come from? And now they've all come around, now that we've all been successfully fighting for years. Now they're all quietly in the mainstream media going like, it probably came from the lab that was studying viruses like this, like somehow it got out. Well, sorry, we didn't let you talk about that.
You hear that? You hear that, China? You hear that, Fauci? Yeah, it's the Wuhan lab. Okay, I'm Chinese. I think you guys already got the idea. It's the Wuhan lab. Wuhan virus. Okay, the Chinese virus. I don't care what you call it. Trump, whatever he calls it, Chinese Wuhan virus. It's the Wuhan lab. Most people really know nowadays that there was something that went awry at Wuhan, and now we got this whole COVID fiasco upon us. And so really looking at the main culprit, which was China. They let this virus out. And now we have to pick up the pieces of trying to politically debate, politically go at each other's throats about COVID, vaccines, masks, and all that. It really hit us hard as a country. And really, we didn't really see the main enemy. It was a virus. It was a political system outside of ours that infiltrated into our mindset. It was truly a virus on multiple levels, socially, politically, and biologically. But I think we can all agree right now that there were many culprits behind the scenes, whether it's Big Pharma kind of like hiding things about vaccines and the outcomes, and even the, the Communist Party in China hiding the numbers of people who were dying. It's all just bonkers, like crazy. But I'm glad that they can actually speak about it, and this former liberal here can also speak on that issue. It's really sad. I'm glad that people are actually aware of this.
Because we would have come together.
Yeah, but if we came together, we'd all go after them.
Yeah.
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 That's why they don't want us to come together.
That's why they don't want that. Yeah.
They don't want us to see this middle ground.
I think my disagreement is pretty simple. The two-party system seems to be an inherent flaw within democracy, because if the answer is to have more political parties, I think that loses its efficiency. And if it's to become one, it stops being a democracy. And where the two-party system fails, we should, make some improvements. Whether the two-party systems are actually causing America harm, I think it's just the way, America was designed.
Yeah. Why can't we change it? They don't want it to be changed.
Because they're making billions.
But what would you change it to?
Well, that's. Do you have?
Well,
you have 10 hours?
I would
Do you have like 85 days?
what I would say is that getting down to one political party would it would seem totalitarian in essence, but I think there's a lot of totalitarian societies. If there is a good moral head of that government, it could do a lot of good.
Yeah.
I would say Singapore, it's illegal to spit gum on the floor, and that's because of their totalitarian government, I'm pretty sure. And but it also promotes decency.
Like Dubai, it's like you can't go over there and yell and like shake your butt in a thong, and like I think that is not okay to do either. And that's kind of totalitarian over there as well.
But those are like very little things that you're giving up to have no control over your own life.
Like Saudi Arabia also is another example. Is like you will chop your hand off literally if you steal, and as a result there is no crime. Imagine living somewhere where zero crime.
But there's no freedom.
Zero crime.
You will literally either. And again, if we want to talk about biased statistics, totalitarian government is not going to be delivering accurate statistics from within when they're saying, hey, look, we chop everybody's hands off when they steal, and now crime is at 0%.
Okay, this is actually a really interesting point. So think about China, right? We're talking about the Chinese here. It's okay, I'm Chinese by blood. And just the CCP, Chinese Communist Party is just, they're all out of whack. Like they make up figures, they make up numbers of death tolls, they spin the story saying that, it wasn't a spy balloon or whatever, and they have so many documented accounts of people in prison because either they're proselytizing as Christians or they're just against the government in various ways. And so totalitarian regimes, it's a big no for me in general, but I get Jabin's point of view. I get some of these other people's points of views where they're like, you know what, you don't have freedom if you have a totalitarian government, but the strictness of law enforcement, that's something of essence that we have kind of forgotten about in this little wrinkle of time here, because we agreed to defund the police. If you don't have the executive branch that's actually executing the law, the legislative branch and the judiciary, and what they agree is law, what is moral, what is okay, well then you're just going to have a free-for-all. Freedom is not all good. Okay, there are many enemies and freeloaders among us. Sadly, we live in a corrupt world with sin, with brokenness, with people who are just always going to be hateful or lazy or stubborn and gluttonous and out for themselves and self-centered. Like, hey, I get it, like we're all human, right? But there are going to be people who are going to take advantage of others, and so that's why we need a moral law. We need the law as a social state, whether you're religious or not, as a social state to be able to get along with everybody. The law is how we play the game. The social game is hard to play. But when you have enforcement of the law, like in Singapore, like Saudi Arabia, like in the Chinese Communist Party, you get to see a lot more agreement, whether they agree because they can't disagree or because they actually agree with the law. So the law is a tricky question, and freedom, I prefer more freedom. But I get where law enforcement, as we see in this country, has dwindled, and we actually don't have actual following the law, which is really bad. Another point, though, for another day.
Well, and people feel like if they vote for a third party that you're giving it to the other side.
Yes, that's what I did in the Hillary versus Trump election. I voted for Jill Stein, and when I was doing it, I was like, oh, I'm so passionate about it. I'm so passionate about it because renewable energy, green energy, whatever. And then I left the ballot, and I was like, oh no, wait, hold on, is that just going to be kind of like thrown to the side? And
it's not. It's not. It's just a process. It takes time to change, and I think instead of trying to go to like a more restricted society. It's like, how can we fix democracy? And so it's like, how can we actually put power back into the hands of the people? And voting third party, it may not be this generation even that sees the benefit, but it's gonna take one person. I think if Bernie Sanders or Trump had run third party, it would have been a much different scenario. But people are afraid to leave the system, and RFK is trying it now, so we'll see what happens, but it's even hard to get on the ballot as a third party right now.
I am still aligned with certain policies from my former political beliefs.
I know the prompt said policies, but I'm definitely still okay with certain things that are generally seen more as like the conservative thing. I sometimes do agree with conservatives about like people being too sensitive, for example. Like I think that's definitely a problem. Or the cancel culture thing, I think is a totally like a fair issue that is like a very real problem that can be talked about. So, yeah.
I think when I thought of policies, I was thinking of like, I immediately went to the economy because, why are we going so far overseas and billions, trillions of dollars go overseas, but there are people that are literally like outside a Starbucks starving. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, why can't we help this person? And that's where the conflict comes because I'm like, hold on, wait, this is a more conservative idea. However, it's also humanitarian, which I believe is like the root of it is we just need to get to like a common ground with that.
Yeah, that's literally me.
how
I'm like
I
America
feel.
first.
Yeah, I was gonna say like make America great again. Like that's not old school Bush conservatism. You know what I mean?
It's funny, 'cause I'm like,
that's
yeah, why are we worrying about them when like there is people like literally starving in front of me? And
This is like literally the instructions on the airplane. You get like, put on your mask first, your air mask, so that you can breathe, and then help a child or an elderly person, a disabled person next to you. You can't really help people if you're not helping yourself first. And it's not being selfish, it's actually just being wise. You can help people better if you are self-sufficient, and then other people benefit from it, right?
I'm still pro-choice. That's an extremely liberal thing in my community. And other than that, I care about the planet. I care about the animals.
Whoa.
I care about regenerative farming. I think that should be the biggest issue being discussed right now.
Yeah.
The soil is, we die without it, and that is something not many people on the right are touching, and those are huge issues for me.
Yeah, and like getting back to like indigenous cultures and letting the indigenous nations
They know what they're doing.
They know,
and we destroyed it.
Well, exactly. We have a country, a territory, Puerto Rico, that's literally impoverished and in crumbles due to all the natural disasters, and yet we deny it.
And the better we help ourselves, the more we can help them. We got to get our shit straight.
I think that I came out here to say I still hold a lot of the positions I held on the left, and it's kind of funny because I think what's left and right has changed. We don't even know what's up and what's down anymore, because I always thought when I was in the left for 20 years, I marched against the Iraq War. I was anti-corporations, anti-big pharma, anti-war, and now I feel like things have switched to such a degree that it's more of the right who's voicing those concerns when it comes to questioning big pharma, questioning corporations. And so I don't even know if that's accurate to say I hold opinions that the left holds, because I don't know if they hold them anymore.
So I think it's a big problem like with lobbyists, right? Big pharma, Monsanto's the seed corporation, right? So for plants and stuff, like crops, like they are literally just taking up, like not helping the soil become fertile, and we have a low production of actual food production because we're not germinating the way that nature is meant to germinate, like the indigenous people that they were talking about. So like these big corporations, what are they out for? They're out for money. They're out for personal gain. And the more that they can leverage the political system to be able to do that, whether it be drugs and prescriptions or crops and subsidizing farms and using only certain types of seed, that's big pharma and the farm industry in general as well. So I totally agree that there is a lot of liberal beliefs that have switched over to the conservative circles, that, or at least they need to be talked about from the lens of both conservative and liberal. It just is not talked about.
So I don't agree with any of the values that I previously had. I used to be a black supremacist. I used to be anti-American. I used to be a feminist. I used to be an ally. And as I've collected new information and evolved my understanding of the world, I am now pro-American. I see the alphabet community as an acronym for sexual perversions. I see feminism as inherently misogynistic and offensive, honestly. And I see my past black supremacist ways and a lot of pro-black things as very racist. And so it's a flip-flop, and I'm used to be pro-choice. I definitely not. It's obviously the murder of unborn humans, and I just think it's crazy that we don't see that. And there's
Okay, so you kind of have to be on the Patreon with Jubilee to actually see the religious prompt about why they switch, but I'm guessing Javen has come to Jesus. He had a come to Jesus moment. And I feel him. I think that's why I agree with a lot of the type of stances, not perfectly, the way that he words it, like he just goes into it. I get it. There's a timestamp on everything, but I think he really hits on the values, I think, from my community, especially as conservative, evangelical, etc. I hate using the word evangelical because it has like this Republican bent and everything. Again, for me, I'm pretty fluid with my politics, but I vote with my values, and so if it's Republican, sure, let's go for it. And I align a lot with this guy. I like this guy a lot, actually.
and there's no way I could ever go back to holding those beliefs because it just would be wrong.
Never say never, because you've already changed once.
Never.
I don't really hold any conservative values. I'm sure there's some you could find that I'd be like, oh, that's not terrible. I don't really hold a lot of democratic values. I consider myself more a progressive populist.
No, I'm just kidding.
So I think both sides have failed this country and the people in it massively, and I think everyone here actually kind of agrees with that. But we continue to bolster up the two political party system. I think, like I said, neither of them have worked. Our country is eroding and deteriorating. You can't blame just one party because every 8 years the White House changes colors, and it's blue and now it's red, and it's blue and it's red. Congress flips back and forth, and neither party has been able to consistently stay in power because they both suck. So we get one, we hate it, we switch, we hate it, we switch. So I tend to think it all needs to be kind of wiped away, rebuilt, and rethought. I think the experiment has failed.
Yeah. That's fair. And both sides have their extreme, you know, far left and far right. And like most people are generally in the middle, but like I feel like there's nuance in things, and people forget that there's like, you know, it doesn't have to be so black and white. It doesn't have to be one extreme or the other. And say, you know, with different policies like abortion, for example, like, you know, we can be, you know, pro-choice, but like agree that there should be like a limit on when you should be able to abort the baby. Like there's things that people should be able to debate and discuss and like come to you know, a compromise on, whatever it is. There's layers to things, and I just think that we're just such a black and white society right now. I feel like we just are so
That's
like
what I don't like
extreme.
with-
Yeah, I used to be pro-choice, and I think just like learning more from the pro-lifer stance, I just come to this understanding that life is life. And like on an ideological, philosophical level, like I just can't negate the fact that if this baby comes to not even full term, just like first like trimester, second trimester, like most people will agree, was it about 60% say like, oh, first trimester, it's okay to abort, but once it's second and third, like do not abort, you know. Abortion is decreasing as a trend in terms of popularity, and especially with the overturning of Roe v. Wade this past year, we just see that type of rhetoric thrown around a little bit more, and there's a lot of hate coming from both sides. But ultimately, for me, I believe that life is life, and if you can see a person who is wanting to have a baby in one room versus another person who is deciding to abort a baby and they're same third trimester, and one's getting abortion, one is deciding to give birth because they want the baby, it just comes down to preference, and I think that's dwindles down to human selfishness. I really can't see it any other way. Like, it's selfish, not only in that, like, yes, it's hard to ask for help. There are probably people not supporting you in becoming a mother, but end of the day, for me, it's going to be pro-life because I believe that plenty of people can get help if they seek after it. It's very, very hard. I don't want to negate how difficult it is, but ultimately, I believe life is life, and I think that's the best decision you can ever make is life.
Extreme one side or the other, and that's why it's good when we can have we can come in and say, yeah, I agree with this policy on this side, but this policy on this side,
Yeah, instead of just being we're banning abortion, can we just find a middle ground?
Right.
Because we just keep losing on this subject, and I'm tired of losing.
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
People are dying.
But whether you agree with them or not, you just said people are dying. Someone with that viewpoint, they would say, yes, millions of unborn babies.
Yeah,
They view it as, even if you don't agree, it's the loss of a human life is more important to them than allowing the government to have the say over what a woman does with her body. They prioritize it here. I'm still pro-choice, which I know also, my opinions on abortion have been in flux for a few years. We should become more accustomed to saying, I'm thinking about this thing for a long time.
Yeah, and that's why I don't hate on them, because I think it's beautiful, and I'm also a weird Republican. I'm literally pro-choice, but I go, no, you're literally murdering a baby, and I believe it's spiritually demonic. I still want someone to have that.
Okay, she said it. I think that you are murdering a baby. I think most people would agree. You're killing a baby, right? This is life. And for people who are making an argument for why people shouldn't kill other people, why people shouldn't kill themselves, I know plenty of liberal friends who would not advocate for unaliving themselves, right? It's very much in tandem with the argument for pro-lifers. It's pro-lifers are not just pro-birth. Okay, I know plenty people use that argument. I know a lot of my friends, they are part of pregnancy resource centers. They promote healthcare for women. They give resources. They donate. They help children go through school more than they, I think, necessarily need to. But it's just about charity. I think it's a beautiful thing that needs to happen more and more. But I just don't believe in the argument that Republicans or pro-lifers don't care about the baby and the mother. I think they care about both. And I've seen it personally. So yes, it is kind of demonic in the sense that you are literally murdering a baby. I believe everybody has their choice, but the right choice is to choose life.
Right, which is a weird thing, because I'm saying multiple horrible
rational.
things.
Well, I mean, you know what's interesting is who I think you were saying the experiment has failed, and it's I think we've strayed so far away from the experiment. I actually think we have to go back to the Constitution, which people have been abandoning on both sides. I'm not going to say one side more than the other. People have been abandoning the Constitution on both sides. Right. So and so I don't even disagree with you. I don't think the experiment.
Okay, I am not a political science major. I just have AP Gov background, but I think most people can appreciate it if you go back to just basic AP government or even your government class, right? Constitution was written by the founding fathers through the Federalist Papers, an understanding of a framework of America that is not governed simply by a tyrannical power King George in England, but by separate powers, 3 separate powers: legislative branch, the judicial, and the executive. So it is tripartite in that way, but also there's a federal level and the state level. And so in order for other states that don't have as many people to not be mongered or dominated by other states that have more people, they have a say in how they govern themselves. So you can move around. You can move to another state. Say Californians, they didn't really like the policies about COVID or the economics and all the drug-infested cities and the streets and the low enforcement of crime laws. So yeah, I would want to move out of there too. So if California has a rejuvenation of better crime laws, of healthier, safer neighborhoods, less drug-infested streets, and better living standards, say lower rental properties, I think that they would reasonably come back, or other people would move over to California. It's based on policies, and a lot of the times people don't understand that, these things change, and you know what? It's we can grow, we can change. There are different pros and cons to each and every issue.
Experiment has failed. I think that we've gone away from what the experiment was supposed to be. I think we have to take a good hard look at the Constitution and say, what does this say? This is the supreme law of the United States. And there's a lot of people who that's inconvenient for. And good, it should be inconvenient for the government.
Again, to that point, it's just you have a preference. The individual, there's sovereignty also in the individual. We give sovereignty as a nation, as a United States nation. It's based on the individual. It's based on that social contract that we have with the nation. And so if we believe that our government can care for us, we give up and we vote in that direction. But ultimately, there's a separation of power so that it doesn't become tyrannical. that's why we have to vote. That's why we have to get out there and vote.
Convenient for the government. It should be absolutely inconvenient for the government. But anyway, that's what I think.
I love that.
All right.
Thank you.
Nice to
See you.
Okay, guys, I actually really enjoyed that conversation with everybody in the round table, in the middle ground round table. I think they did a really good job with this one. And with a lot of these middle grounds, I really love you, Jubilee, and I think that more of these should happen. I think you guys probably have enjoyed some of these conversations too. I think it goes back to a lot of the podcast conversations that I've been having with authors and researchers and LGBTQ individuals, activists, religious folk, Christians. I think it's all very important because right now we can't always trust the media. We can't trust our political system to deliver. Our leaders seem fraudulent at this point, and so we need something authentic and real. And that's why a big point with some of the conservatives is that Trump was real. RFK, he was real, and he just couldn't get any steam ahead with the Democratic Party. So there's a lot of issues, obviously, with our government, but I think I'm just going to agree that on an individual level, we can vote still. Primaries are our thing. It's not just the national level. And secondly, we need to speak out. We need to speak out with what we actually believe and live that out fully. And you have that power too. And so don't feel like you are too oppressed. And yeah, that's the conservative side of me that once I was sensitive, more liberal, but now I believe that you actually have to take responsibility for yourself, first and foremost. And if you really want to be able to have an impact on the world, you got to look at the man in the mirror and you got to make a choice in your own life. If you can put your house in order, as JP always says, and as Jesus would say too, then you can actually go and make sense of the world. And so I hope you guys enjoy this little time together looking at this former conservative versus former liberal conversation at Middle Ground. Take a moment to subscribe, put on that notification bell, and I really hope to see you guys in the future and for another one of these. All right, let me know what you think in the comments below. See you next time.